Hi everyone, this video is about how to end a personal recount. So you have written the beginning, you have elaborated on the events, So how do you end off your personal recount? Okay, actually this is really simple. The easiest way to end off a personal recount is just to end it off by um, just telling us about what happened at the end. Okay, that means there's nothing special. There's nothing special that you actually need to do to end off a personal recount. Okay, so just tell us what happened at the end. All right, but some writers, they really want to include reflections and thoughts. Okay, so this is the same example that I gave you earlier on. So let's see. Okay, so at the end of the museum trip, okay, they took the bus back to school, and then the student says, okay, so at 12 noon, the author reached school and he took a bus home, he had lunch and took a shower and he took a nap. So at which point should we end, or should we end even later than 1:30 p.m.? Maybe we should end at 8 p.m. when the author finally goes to, maybe at 10 p.m. when the author finally goes to sleep. Is it really wise to talk about so many things that are not very relevant to the excursion? So, well, it's not advisable, okay? I don't recommend that you tell me about the entire day, unless the events that happen in the entire day from morning to night are interesting and relevant. So in this case, if let's say the museum trip ended somewhere in noontime, okay, then you know what, it just ends somewhere around here. Okay, don't go on and tell me about what happened next, because these are not important at all. Okay, so over here I really think that it's best to end off at around 12 noon. And if you're writing a paragraph on this part, okay, then don't spend too much effort elaborating. All right, I think even if you end off at 11 a.m. when you say you completed the tour, it's also perfectly fine. All right, it's also perfectly fine. So my suggestion is to end off at the end of the main event, the important event, at the end of the important one. After that, you don't have to mention all those. Okay, when it was finally time to board the coach, okay, so I mentioned many of my classmates looked disappointed. I'm sorry. I wanted to stay in the museum, but my form teachers told us that we had to go back to school. As the class grown, I made a mental note to ask my mother for a museum trip during the school holidays. Okay, so over here the author ended off at 11 a.m. Okay, 11 a.m. when it was time to take the coach back to school. Another way that you can end off your recount is to end off with reflections and thoughts. For example, you can say, it was truly a satisfying day at the museum. Olden day Singapore, the olden day Singapore artifacts like oil lamps, letters and utensils really caught my attention. The trip made me realize how hard life was for our ancestors and how fortunate I am to be living in modern Singapore. So you can end off with a paragraph like this. This type of paragraph, you can write it after this paragraph, okay? This sort of paragraph where you talk about the end of the main event, okay? That means after you write this, you can add on by writing some reflections and thoughts, okay? And then, so you end off your essay with this kind of paragraph with that talks about how you felt, okay? But you have to be careful when you're writing reflections and thoughts. Not, not all sorts of emotions and feelings, okay, will really help you to end off your personal recount nicely, okay? So I really advise that you write about your feelings about the event, not any other random feelings. What you learned from the experience, this is always a good option. And other interesting must be interesting thoughts, okay? Don't write uninteresting thoughts, don't write irrelevant things. Now, some students say that they can't think of reflections or thoughts to write about. Because in order to write good reflections and thoughts, you need to have a certain level of writing. Okay, so some students, they really struggle with this. My suggestion to you is, if you're not comfortable with writing reflections, you don't have to. Okay, you don't have to force yourself to write reflections, especially when your personal record is already long enough. That means especially when you already hit the word count. Okay, so this is not as entirely compulsory. So you know yourself. If you know that you still can't write thoughts and reflections very well, you're still struggling with simply describing what happened, okay, describing events, then just focus on, improving how to elaborate events. Don't write reflections, okay. Focus on making your essays interesting by describing, by using your five senses. Okay, so there are two ways to end off a personal recount. One way is just end off by telling me what happened at the end of the main event. Don't end off with irrelevant, uninteresting events, even though they did happen on the same day. Another way to end off a personal recount is to tell me what you felt. Okay, that means you write about that means you write reflections or thoughts, okay, about the events. Alright, so that's it for this video lesson, and I'll see you again in class.